for very many EU member states, including Ireland. The legal advice of the EU institutions and the Attorney General's office was that the terms of the agreement were not in breach of either European Union or international law. The EU and Turkey continue to work together to address this crisis. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my sympathy to the people of Turkey, and in particular to the families of those who were killed in the bombing at Istanbul airport on the 28th of June last. I signed the book of condolence at the embassy last week, conveyed our deep shock at this dreadful act to the ambassador.
Clare Daly.
Well, Minister is quite correct. The reports are incredibly worrying. But they're not unsurprising, and I think the fact that the Turkish regime has basically denied them or said we were doing everything in accordance with a plan actually is a bad sign rather than something to take comfort from. And you see, I think the problem for the European Union is sort of saying, tut lads, we're not really too happy with what you're doing here, is sending them a contradictory message when we continue to do business with them. It is a fact that shootings of refugees have taken place, arbitrary detention, deportation without due process. Absolute fact. And by our continuing to deal with that, then we are complicit in that, not only in terms of the refugees themselves, but it also gives a green light for the continuance of the Turkish authorities' poor treatment of the Kurdish population. And you will know, Minister, according to the UN, Turkish security forces have shot civilians, destroyed infrastructure, carried out arbitrary arrests, triggered a wave of displacement in their ongoing campaign against the Kurds. And by us continuing to do business, we're given a green light for that to continue.
As I said earlier, and I think Deputy Daly may have been present, the EU and Turkey have been working together for many months to address what is a hugely challenging migrant crisis. Turkey is hosting an estimated 2.7 million refugees, an enormous number for any country. So the European Union is committed to assisting Turkey, has established a €3 billion facility for refugees in Turkey. This facility aims to support Syrians and other refugees by providing access to food, shelter, education and healthcare. As part of the deal, the EU has also agreed to take from Turkey on a one-for-one basis a Syrian refugee for each irregular migrant returned there from the European Union. And I hope the Deputy will agree. And I acknowledge the fact that there are issues, and I acknowledge the fact that there are problems, and I acknowledge the fact that there are instances that have taken place recently that are a matter of huge concern. And I share that concern. But I ask the Deputy to agree that the agreement entered into and the manner in which this process is underway are not the actions of an institution intent on outsourcing its problems.
Thank you, Minister. Clare Daly.
Minister, your sort of fantasy account of support and food and shelter and everything being grand is belied by circumstances which have been highlighted by media outlets not the most radical, such as Der Spiegel and so on, who've given stories about Syrians who are being brought to Turkey from Greece and being taken directly to detention centres. We know that these detention centres are largely off limits to journalists, to aid organisations, lawyers and so on. One MEP who did manage to visit one actually reported that detainees are only permitted to leave their cells for a few minutes every day. The Turkish regime is a brutally undemocratic, vicious regime. Its treatment of the Kurdish population is absolutely reprehensible, not to mind its treatment of refugees either. And that is an established fact from many of the international organisations which deal with refugees are saying this. And I really don't think you've done enough in highlighting this when you're dealing with your European counterparts.
Final reply.
Under the agreement between the European Union and Turkey, each migrant has the right to apply for international protection in Greece, to have their application assessed on an individual basis in line with international law, including with a right to appeal. Indeed, part of the assessment of persons process includes ascertaining whether Turkey can be considered a safe country given an irregular migrant or asylum seeker's individual circumstances. Turkey has provided a series of formal guarantees as part of the EU-Turkey agreement that Syrian refugees returned to Turkey will be granted temporary protection upon return, Non-Syrians in need of international protection who are returned to Turkey will also be able to apply for and receive protection there. The European Commission reported on the 4th of May that Turkey has received all those returned from Greece in accordance with the agreement. But I share the concern as evidenced by the Deputy, and I wish to assure you that we will continue to monitor the situation. And I'd like to point out that Ireland is one of a number of countries who continues to provide humanitarian aid to the region, which is obviously a priority in terms of the treatment of refugees and asylum seekers and those displaced.
Number